safe at home. Here we are discussing about chapter number 1, crop production and management of standard 8. In the previous lectures we have discussed about various agricultural activities, right? And in the last lecture we were discussing about the protection from weeds. So let's recall, what are weeds? Weeds are nothing but the unwanted or undesirable plants which grow along with our crops, right? So we must have to remove these weeds if we want better crop production. So the process of removal of weeds is known as weeding. Very right. Okay. So weeding is the process of removal of weeds, and this process must be done by each and every farmer. Okay. When it is the right time to do the weeding? Yes. If you remember, I told that it is the best time to remove the weeds before it gives flowers or seeds, right? When it gives flowers or seeds, from the seeds again new weeds can grow. So we must have to remove it before it produces flowers and seeds. Then we studied about various methods of weeding. Okay, that is physical removal by pulling the plants or uprooting the plants, then by physical removal by the help of implement known as khurpi. Then we studied that we sow the seeds before we have to do ploughing or tilling, and the last method is to apply the chemicals. So these chemicals are known as weedicides. Okay, so when farmers spray weedicides, these weedicides kill the weeds and not harm our crops, right? Okay, so these weedicides, when sprayed on the plants, sprayed on the crops, farmer must have to cover their mouth with a piece of cloth. Okay, then we studied about the activity known as harvesting. Okay, as the crop get matured, we have to harvest the crop. Okay, this is done by sickle manually, and if we have tractor driven harvester, then we can do it with it. After harvesting, the next step is to remove the chaff, means cover of the seeds from the seeds. So this can be done by two processes. One is threshing and the other is winnowing. Generally, the farmers who have small land, they can do the winnowing. Winnowing is better option for them. Now there are machines available which can do both the harvesting and threshing together, and this machine is known as combiner. So this is all about the last lecture. Now let's move towards our last agricultural activity, and that is storage. If we do all these activities, that is preparation of soil, then sowing of seeds, then adding manure and fertilizers, irrigation, protection from weeds, harvesting, all these activities we are doing, but if we do not store the crops, store the grain properly, then all these activities are of no use. So storage is an important task. Okay, all farmers must have to store their crops properly, right? So these crops must be prevented, okay, must be safe from various environmental conditions like moisture, okay, then various microorganisms, rats, and insects. Okay, if we protect our crops from all these things, that is microbes, insects, rats and moisture, then we can use these crops properly. Okay, so we must keep our crops safe from moisture, insects, rats and microbes. Okay, these three, insects, rats and microbes, they eat our crops and they spoil them. And moisture, if moisture is present in the crops, then what happen? The crops get attacked by some fungi or bacteria and the crop get spoiled, right? So we must have to keep our crops safe from all these things, right? And before storing, generally all farmers do one thing. What is that? That they keep their crops in the sunlight. Means they dry the crops, right? So all the crops must be kept in the sunlight to get dry, because the harvested crops must have moisture in them. Okay, so if this moisture is present in the crop, it can spoil the crop. So the farmers dry them up in the sunlight, and as the crops kept in the sunlight, they get dried, right? So crops should be dried properly before storage. Okay, now how all these crops can be stored? So farmers can store these crops in the gunny bags, right? Or they can store in metallic bins. Okay, so these are the storage bags in which farmers can store these crops. But if large scale storage is happen, then these gunny bags, okay, or jute bags and the metallic bins can be kept. Okay, they must have to keep these bags into the large rooms, that is known as the silos and granaries. Okay, silos and granaries are nothing but the large storage room where the farmers keep these metallic beans and jute bags. Okay, so before storage, specific chemical treatments is required. So before farmers store these jute bags and metallic beans in any room, the room must get some chemical treatment. Means the room should be kept clean, okay, and there were no insects, rats, microbes present in the room, right? So if this will present in the room, then they attack on our crops, our grains, and they spoil our crop, right? So this is about the storage. But the question is, if we want to store the grains at our home, what can we do? Okay, yes, you must have seen your mother that whenever she is keeping anything, okay, for long time use, then what she is doing? She is keeping some neem leaves, dried neem leaves in them, right? So using of dried neem leaf is also a method of storage, right? Okay, so this is all about the storage. Now let's move towards our last topic of this chapter, that is food from animals. As we all know that many people in the whole world depends on animal for their food. We know that we get many things from the animals like eggs, meat, milk, honey, etc. Right? So many people depends on animals for their food, and they get the food from these animals, and these animals are reared somewhere. Means some people are there which rear these animals, and from these animals we get food, right? Specifically, if we take an example, then the people who are living near the coastal areas, their main diet may be the fish. Okay, so many people depends on animal. For that, like agriculture, animals are also reared properly, and then from these animals we get our food. Okay, these animals which are reared at home or farm, okay, they must get proper care, food and shelter. Means they must get all these things properly, then and then we can get our proper food from them, right? So this process of rearing of animals and give them proper care, food and shelter is known as animal husbandry. Okay, so here in animal husbandry, in the large scale the animals are reared and they get proper care, food and shelter, and from them we are getting our food, right? So this is all about our chapter number 1, that is crop production and management. So let's recall all the agricultural activities. First of all, we studied about what is crop, and there are two types of crop, that is rabi crops and kharif crops. Okay, rabi crops are generally grown in winter and kharif crops are generally grown in monsoon season. Then we studied about various agricultural activities, that is first is preparation of soil. Okay, before sowing the seeds we must have to prepare our soil, and this is done by ploughing or tilling our field. Okay, because of ploughing and tilling the soil become loosen and there will be growth of microbes and earthworm occurs easily. Okay, the tilling and ploughing also allow the air and water to go inside the soil, so roots will breathe the air properly and our plants, our crops get water in proper amount. After plowing, we must have to do the leveling to level the uneven soil. The various implements used here are nothing but the hoe, the plow and tractor driven cultivator. Then second activity which we have studied is sowing the seeds. Before sowing the seeds, we must have to select the seeds. Okay, for selection of seeds we must have to soak them into water. The seeds which float will be removed and the seeds which sink are good and healthy seeds. So we can sow these seeds with the help of seed drill and traditional method of sowing the seeds. Okay, then what we have to do? We have to add manure and fertilizers to the soil. Farmers are doing these things. Okay, they can add fertilizers and they can add manure. Specific difference between fertilizers and manure is organic compound or natural compound, while fertilizer is inorganic compound, or we can say we can make it in factories. It is specific in some nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, etc. Right? So after adding these fertilizers and manure, what is the next step? Right, irrigation. So there are various methods of irrigation. Irrigation means to give water to the plants. Okay, different methods of irrigation are traditional method and modern methods. In traditional method, the water can be waste, right? So we must have to follow modern methods if we do not have proper amount of water. Okay, so various modern methods are sprinkler irrigation and drip irrigation. After we irrigate our field, the next step is to protect our crops from the weeds, right? So weeding must be done. Weeding means we should remove the weeds, okay, so it will not harm our crops. And as the crops get matured, we have to harvest them. So this is the next activity which we have studied, that is harvesting. Okay, as the crops mature, we have to harvest them, and after harvesting we have to store them. But before storing the crops, we have to keep them in the sunlight. Okay, so the moisture will be removed from the crops. Okay, this is all about the various agriculture activities. Okay, and in the last we studied about animal husbandry. Means we depend on animals, okay, for our food. So for that, some people rear the animals. They give proper care, proper food and shelter to these animals, and from these animals we get our food, right? So this is known as animal husbandry. Now in our next lecture we will discuss chapter number 7. Okay, so till that, be safe and be at home. Thank you.
आभार।